Back when I was in college, I worked on staff at one of the largest campus ministries in the country. It was an incredible experience. It really did shape who I am spiritually. And I look back with tremendous gratitude for that. I grew so much and I learned a ton. That was where I received a call to ministry. That was when I made the decision to go to seminary. It was just an incredible time. But there were also some things that happened during that time that pushed me to think a little harder about what I believe and why. One of the things that our ministry did was bring in speakers that would come and do conferences or teach on different topics. And one time, a man from right here in the Charlotte area came and taught a course based on his book, You May All Prophesy. The gist of it was, every Christian has the gift of prophecy. It just needs to be explored and trained and sharpened and honed, just like you would with any other spiritual gift, preaching, edification, exhortation, etc. On page 24 of his book, I want to read you this. He's dealing with different myths that circulate out there about prophets or prophecy. And he says on page 24, myth number 5, only a few special people are called to prophesy. So he's going to make the case that no, everybody is called to prophesy. Here's what he says. In his discourse to the Corinthians, Paul clearly speaks to this issue. For you may all prophesy, and all is italicized, one by one, that all may learn and all may be comforted. 1 Corinthians 14:31, King James Version. Paul states that all may prophesy. Jesus said that his sheep hear his voice. As stated before, prophecy in its most basic form is hearing what God is saying about someone and relaying it to them. If all believers can hear his voice, then all can prophesy. If you are born again, you can prophesy. You may need to develop your sensitivity and understanding of what God is saying, but you have the ability and potential to prophesy. It's not limited to special people. Now, I want to make it clear right up front, I am not a cessationist. I believe in the gifts of the Spirit. I believe that prophecy still happens. I believe in the miraculous, all of these things. So I'm not coming at this issue from someone who does not believe in the gift of prophecy. However, I am coming at this issue from the perspective of a Bible teacher. And the text that he appeals to make his case that all may prophesy, whether or not all people have the gift of prophecy or have the ability to prophesy, that's a whole different argument. But what I want to look at is whether you can extrapolate that from this verse that he quotes, 1 Corinthians 14:31. And that's exactly what we do in this clip from our video series, Bible for the Rest of Us. So let's take a look. In 1 Corinthians 14, you find this verse, for you can all prophesy in turn so that everyone may be instructed and encouraged. Now, when I was doing campus ministry, college ministry, back at the University of Georgia, there was a group that came, actually from here, from just down the road, and they came to Georgia and they taught. They gave a week-long, like, kind of revivalish kind of teaching, but they were known for teaching and doing the prophetic ministry. And the person who came to lead it, and they were great people. I mean, they were wonderful. Some of the nicest people I'd ever met. And even to this day, I mean, they're just really nice. But one of the guys, the leader of the group that came, he had written a book. And it was called You May All Prophesy. And that's the title of the book. And it's this verse. And so he talked to us, a couple hundred students at Wesley Foundation of Georgia, and he said, I looked up this verse in Greek. This is a verse he preached from. I looked this verse up in Greek. I made sure to look up the Greek word all. And you know what it means? You know what I found out that the Greek word all means? Everybody's like, what? He goes, it means all. And ha ha ha, everybody laughs. And you may all prophesy. And so we're all going to teach you how to do. And that was the thrust of it, was you may all prophesy. And he's right. The Greek word does mean all. That's not up for debate. But the question is, who's the all that Paul's talking to? Because in that section, Paul's talking specifically about how to do this whole prophecy thing in a church format, in a church setting. And if you read it, it's small up here because it's just a big chunk of it. So if you have your own Bible, you can read it and see. But he says, as you're reading through the chapter, what then shall we say, brothers and sisters? When you come together, each of you has a hymn or a word of instruction, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation. Everything must be done so that the church can be built up. This is what Paul's writing about in 1 Corinthians 14. The Corinthian church was what we would today call charismatic.
I mean, they practiced these gifts. People were getting healed. People were getting words and prophecies and knowledge. And I mean, it was going on. It's not like they were making this stuff up. The Spirit was moving in this church. And to a point where Paul was having to write them, and this is actually his second letter. We don't have his first letter to Corinth. We just have his second and his third letter, which are 1st and 2nd Corinthians. But he's writing them, and he's saying, you guys, you got the passion. Let's tighten some things up here real quick. And one of the things he was telling them was their services had become almost this free-for-all, this just nonsensical people carrying on and trying to one-up each other on the spiritual meter. And if you've been in some churches where the gifts are practiced and celebrated, that can very easily happen. In fact, it still does. And so he says, everything must be done so that the church may be built up. If anyone speaks in a tongue, 2 or at the most 3 should speak, 1 at a time, and someone must interpret. If there's no interpreter, the speaker should keep quiet in the church and speak to himself and to God. 2 or 3 prophets should speak, and the others should weigh carefully what is said. He's instructing them. He's not saying don't prophesy. He's saying, no, prophesy, but do it in a way that builds up the church, and do it in a way that involves your mind. Because the person may have a message, a prophetic utterance, but if there's no interpretation of that utterance, it's meaningless in a group setting. It does no one any good. If a word is given in a prophetic language, whether it's a heavenly language or an earthly language, that whatever, if there's no interpretation, if there's nobody there to say what that word meant, it does no one any good. So he goes on and says, and if revelation comes to someone who's sitting down, the first speaker should stop. Verse 31, for you can all prophesy in turn so that everyone may be instructed and encouraged. The spirits of the prophets are subject to the control of the prophets. And we'll get to the second part in just a minute. But it's important to see. So the all, my brother from down the road who was teaching us, he was right that Greek does all means all. But the all is all of the ones who Paul is talking to in that section in its context, which are the 2 or 3 that are prophesying. Do you get that? He's not making a universal statement of all mankind can prophesy. In fact, elsewhere he writes about people not having all the gifts, people having different gifts. And he, do all prophesy? Do all do the healing? Do all speak? The response would be, well, no. Everybody has different gifts. So the person who was teaching this, he had the passion, and maybe he had the gifting. Maybe prophetic gifting was his thing. But it's not everybody. Scripture doesn't say you may all prophesy. It says you guys need to prophesy, and you need to do it in order, and you need to do it so that people can be built up, not just showing off, and you all need to do it in turn. You see how radical difference that makes when you put it in its context? So that's the first thing. All may prophesy. All of the ones who have the gift of prophecy may prophesy if they do it in turn, if they do it orderly, if it doesn't devolve into chaos and people running around and just the gifts going wild.
Again, I want to make clear, this is not aimed at attacking anyone's views of the spiritual gifts so much as it is helping us to not take Scripture out of context and to understand that sometimes our theology leads us to put more on a specific passage than that passage is actually saying. And that's exactly what I believe has been done in this case. If this course interests you and you'd like to go deeper, or you'd like to take a look at other passages that Christians have misinterpreted or misapplied in different situations, then I encourage you, check out Bible for the Rest of Us. There's a link below in the description, and the course is entirely free. You, your Sunday school class, your small group, your entire church can do the course. The workbook is free to download. Everything's free about it, and we're able to do this because of those of you who believe in and support this ministry. And aside from becoming a monthly Dojo donor, the best way you can support this ministry is to help us grow this YouTube channel. So consider liking and sharing this video, and go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out some of the other videos we have here on the channel. And if you like what we're doing, there's ways that you can support Disciple Dojo in the link in the descriptions below.